to Spiritual Basics Podcast with April and Jen. I am Jen Merkel.
And I'm April Darley.
And thank you so much for being here. We're really excited about today's episode.
Well, Jen, it's been a while since I've seen and talked to you. So what's going on in Jen world?
Well, as you already know, I am moving soon. I've actually, let's see, when is it? About 2.5 weeks or so, I'm going to be moving, and I'm, just getting overwhelmed with everything. So much going on.
Well, I'm excited because you guys, she's moving down the street for me, like 5 minutes away. So pretty excited to have one of my best friends down the street. That's going to be awesome.
It's going to be fantastic. So, so my big thing I've got going on right now is that I'm actually not packing. I should be, but it's like, it's just, you know what, actually, it's kind of like overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I think I'm just really procrastinating. So.
Well, if you've listened to the very first episode we did of Spiritual Basics Podcast, you will find out that I have the superpower of astrology and working astrology into absolutely everything. So one of the reasons that you may be procrastinating is Saturn has been retrograde for months, and Saturn is our planet of you better work and karma, and you better work hard. I feel like Rihanna going, B, you better work. You know, work it. And so with it being retrograde, it's made everybody feel like we've just been running through molasses. Like we can't get anything done.
For sure.
But on the September 18th, that went direct. So now things are going to start going just so much smoother for us. And you're actually going to be able to get a lot of these great ideas. That's the double-edged sword of retrograde, is that you get great ideas, but then you have no go-go juice to make them happen.
Oh, great. So. Yeah. I feel like I always have a ton of ideas, but like if I don't write them down, I either forget them or I'll write them down and then I never have enough time to implement all my ideas.
Yeah. It's like, you know what? Great. Write them down when the muse is on you, because the muse does not wait.
No, it's true. I've got to make sure I always have a pen and paper, because I know what you say about Aquarius is always having good ideas.
It's true. Yeah.
So, what's going on? So what's going on with you, Miss April?
Oh, doggy drama in my world today.
Yeah. Bella, is Bella feeling better today?
She is. So my dog is a rescue dog, and she loves to eat street food.
You know, quite honestly, don't we all? I mean, come on, street food,
right, street food, right?
I think I picture us like being in New Delhi eating street food.
And one of my other superpowers is I can fatten up a dog. So if y'all got a skinny dog out there, just let me board it for a couple of weeks and it'll be a fat dog by the time you get it. So it's not like this girl is underfed, but she just loves her street food. And she ate something, you know how dogs are, they're like toddlers. It goes in the mouth and you don't even know what it was.
Right.
So she got super sick, and here I am, homeopathy. You were very kind enough to do an energy treatment, and she did feel better like right away after your energy treatment.
I'm so glad. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so cool, you guys, because I wish I could talk to animals, and Jen has some of that gift, and it was a gift for me to know what my dog is thinking and saying. So
you're so sweet. Aww. Yeah, I love talking to animals. As a matter of fact, and even energy healings, as I had mentioned to you, like I've done more energy healings on animals than I have on people, and it just kind of worked out that way because I don't know, maybe I'm just more drawn to animals. So not that there's anything wrong with people. It's just, animals are, I don't know, they're less judgmental and standoffish.
It's true, right?
And they don't get angry driving through traffic or whatever.
Right?
They don't have a bad day at work,
Right.
So,
yeah.
Anyhow, so today we are talking about the clairs. This is our part 2, right? So all about the clairs part 2.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you didn't catch episode 1 of All About the Clairs, where we went into clairvoyance, which is clear seeing, and clairsentience, which is clear feeling. So today we're going to finish that out of the second half of the 4 main clairs, plus some bonus clairs, which are kind of rare and unusual. And just a little bit of recap, everyone has the clairs to some degree, but it's like a muscle. Some of them you're going to be developed, while the others may not be your main go-tos. So
that's true. And then also usually someone will have, like, you'll have 2, like one really, really strong clair and another one that's just almost as strong, and then the other ones are quite a bit weaker.
Right. And I think that Jen and I chose to put these two particular clairs we're going to talk about tonight together because it can be a little confusing to tell one apart from the other. So we're going to do a little breakdown of each and try to give you an in-depth look so that you can distinguish between the two. So first off is clairaudience, which is clear hearing. And this was such an interesting one. And I was telling Jen earlier when I was writing up the notes for this show, I probably would have told you it's my number 3 clair, but now I'm thinking, is it number 2? I don't know. I think I have more a clairaudience than I gave myself credit for. But it's clear hearing. And just like clear seeing, this can be with your inner ear or your outer ear. So that clear hearing generally involves hearing a voice of some kind. So this can be your own voice or the voices of your guides, your spirit team, your ancestors. So much like clairvoyance, it can be a little bit scary sometimes, especially if it's not your voice. So I do want to give a note, since can be kind of a scary one. These voices will never tell you to harm yourself or other people. And if you are hearing voices that are asking you to harm yourself or other people, then please head over to the appropriate medical professional, because these voices that you're going to be hearing from your spirit team, your angels, your ancestors, it is a loving voice. Right?
Always, yes, absolutely.
Always loving voice. If you hear voices that are criticizing you or rude, that's not your spirit team. Right, that's ego. And so it's important to distinguish that out. Your spirit team is loving.
And get professional help, absolutely.
Yes. Now, clairaudience can manifest, and so I've had this happen. I wake up with a song in my head. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, absolutely. A song in your head, or, for sure.
Yeah. So when that happens to me, in that twilight time, I call it twilight time, where you're either almost asleep or almost about to wake up, your mind is very receptive to hearing your spirit team. So sometimes I've woken up with a song in my head. I have not heard this song for years.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I will go and Google the lyrics, and there's a message in there for me. So clairaudience tends to work like that.
Do you think that has something to do with the fact that you're just coming out of a dream state?
It could be your subconscious is certainly in there. So your dreams are the places where your subconscious works out your problem. So absolutely. But your spirit, like I said, you're relaxed. So your spirit team's able to reach you a lot easier.
Exactly.
So you may actually even hear your name being called. And that's happened to me before, where I've heard April and I look around and nobody's there. So it's just your spirit team saying hello to you.
April.
That's right. It's usually loud, like, April. I'm like, what? I think it would be creepy if it was like whispered over and over. But
April, I'm here for you.
Yeah, I'd be like, I'm going to be staging myself right now. Staging up. But music factors hugely for somebody who's clairaudient, because you may hear your messages in music or in the conversations of other people. Or you could be flipping through the radio or the TV and you've been wondering about something and you happen to land on an interview that gives you the exact information that you've been wanting. So those are examples of clairaudience. And where it can get tricky is clairaudience can be confused with claircognizance. And this was certainly the case for me, because the information pops in my head, but I do hear it too. So that can be a little hard to distinguish. Am I hearing it or am I just knowing it and it's popping in my head? But if clairaudience is something that you feel like you have and you want to develop that a little bit more, then an exercise you can do is actually try to tune into sound. And it's about closing your eyes or being in a still place. Park bench is a pretty good one. Close your eyes and just kind of concentrate on what sound you're hearing, and then pick one. Is it the wind rustling the leaves? Is it the sound of children laughing? And just try to tune into that one particular sound and see if you can turn up the volume and practice isolating that to help your hearing become a bit more sensitive. Now, if clairaudience is your thing, you may notice that you already have sensitive hearing. So if you're at a rock concert or in a loud place, you actually may feel more comfortable with earplugs or headphones on to kind of insulate that. And it always makes me think, there's this one psychic that I follow. She's hugely clairaudient. And just in the 2 years since I've been following her, she's moved apartments 3 times because her neighbors are too noisy. Mm-hmm. Now, I live in an apartment too, and there's normal apartment noise, but if she's so clairaudient, it's magnified for her. And so nowhere is quiet enough. And I just keep wondering in my mind, is this woman going to end up in a soundproof house? Because she looks so sensitive.
Yeah, we just have to have a quiet room.
A quiet room.
Quiet house.
Exactly. And so you may also have tinnitus, or that ringing in your ears. And it's generally in one ear rather than both. And I call those angel downloads. It's your spirit team that has said something in a super high frequency. And just know that it's a little bit annoying, but you can ask them to turn down the volume if it's painful for you.
Or the pitch, yeah.
Or the pitch, right? You can ask them to deliver that information in a way that isn't hurting you. But just know that that frequency is being delivered to your subconscious. So it will be information revealed to you when it's time to be revealed to you. So don't worry that you're missing something if you don't know what the squealing is. Mm-hmm. Okay, and Jen, you know that I love crystals and crystal healing.
Who doesn't love crystals?
Right? So I was like, how can I work crystals into these clairs? So citrine is a stone that I work with a lot. And it's a little known, quirky little fact of citrine, but it's called the Great Unwinder. So it can help you unwind blocks. I mean, typically, because it's yellow, we would think of it for a solar plexus chakra, but it can also help with ear chakras, those little ear chakras. So it can actually help you open up your ear antennas, if you will, and help you unwind and release any blocks that you might have towards your clairaudient gift.
Very cool. So just a little bit more about clairaudience, just some things. April, everything you talked about was really cool. And I just wanted to add a couple of things too. I am a singer, and that is part of being clairaudient. If you, meaning you, our audience, like to sing, whether you're in a choir or you just sing in the car like I do, or maybe you talk to yourself. That kind of a thing is definitely clairaudient, because it's not just about hearing. It's also about talking. It's about your throat chakra. Interestingly enough, it's about communication. So if you're a writer, that's another way of bringing out your clairaudience. And we won't go into too much detail about automatic writing, but it's basically the process of writing what comes to your mind and using that to connect with spirit. And that's a really great exercise for clairaudience. But it also, interestingly enough, is, claircognizance too.
It's true. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, those two can be very hard to tell apart. Even sometimes for myself, the information I'm getting, did I hear it or did it just pop into my mind? So it's a little tricky.
Well, and the interesting thing about that is that it's probably both. That's the answer, because like we said, they do work together. The clairs do work together in different ways. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But since we were talking about claircognizance, I will go into that. Claircognizance is clear knowing. So it's about like your gut feeling, or you just know, or something comes to mind, and it's your intuitive knowledge. So it's not like clairvoyance where you see something or, that kind of a thing. It's knowing something. And some examples of that would be like if you ever walk into a room and you can feel the energy and like it just feels tense. And, you find out that there was an argument in there just before you got in there, or even an hour before you got in there, but there's that energy, you pick up on that. Also, like just getting a feeling, like you don't know why, you can't explain it, but you decide to drive a different route to work, or to, practice or whatever. And, that could be because an accident happened, or it could be the opposite. Maybe you were meant to be somewhere that you wouldn't be otherwise. Another thing too is if you were one of those people that had like an invisible friend as a child, that's another claircognizant thing. Getting a gut feeling about people when you meet them, that's a really, really common one. The other thing too is if people ask you for advice, or if, like to listen to your stories, if you're a good storyteller, good at finding lost things, this is all claircognizant. So one thing too I wanted to talk about before I get into exercises that you can do to strengthen your claircognizant abilities is that claircognizants often have a hard time telling between their thoughts and the idea that they made it up. Because especially if you're, just kind of new to this and you've just discovered your abilities, and certainly that was the case with me, where I thought, I knew something, but I thought, probably it's just my head making it up. Well, I have news for you. It is not you making it up. It is your claircognizance. Right. And part of growing as a psychic and learning is trusting your abilities and trusting that when something comes to you, that it's real. Mm-hmm. So, just wanted to kind of mention that. The one way to tell also, if you aren't sure, is where is that thought coming from? So if you're like, you thought, you think, oh my gosh, my boyfriend is cheating on me. So think about that. Maybe he is cheating on you, but maybe he's not. So kind of dissect a little bit. Just think about that thought independently. Is he cheating on you? Is that thought coming out of love, or is it coming out of fear? Because if it's coming out of fear, it's coming from your ego. If it's coming out of love, that is your intuition. So that's how you can tell.
So a great example of what you just said is I went to get a reading from a psychic, and she was able to tell if it was ego or a spiritual thought that was coming in because of how she felt. She said if a thought comes in on the right side of her head, it was ego. And if a thought came in on the left side of her head, it was spirit. So sometimes she would stop and ask, where is this coming from? And pay attention to that feeling in her mind, that claircognizant feeling, like which side. And that happens to me sometimes as well, that I'll get a tug in my brain. I'll get a little tug or a mental tug, mm-hmm. and that's your claircognizant ability.
That's a really good example of being in tune with, mm-hmm. The messages that are coming in too. So that's really fantastic.
And this gift was a particular bear for me in med school because as part of a residence, we had to draw up a treatment plan for a patient, and treatments would pop into my head. And then my attending physician would be, why do you want to do that? And I couldn't answer. I'd be like, I just need to, that's the right treatment. Mm-hmm. And that was so frustrating it's the right one, but I can't tell you exactly why it's the right one because it may not necessarily make logical sense.
And it's not like you're going to tell your professor, well, it came to me. I just know because I'm claircognizant,
right?
It probably isn't going to fly.
No, I think one or two of them, it probably would have. But as far as that whole teaching hospital kind of aspect, they really wanted you to be able to tell XYZ and not all the other metaphysical things that were coming in.
So some of the exercises you can do to improve your claircognizance. One of the things that you can do that you might already be doing is just chatting with your spirit guides and your angels that are always around you. Just have a conversation with them. If you talk to yourself, think about it this way. You probably aren't really talking to yourself, right? Because you're really communicating with your spiritual support system. So that's a really good way. And again, also, if you're talking out loud, again, there we go with the clairaudient, right? So another thing is what I used to do, even before I had any inkling that I was claircognizant or had any spiritual gifts, I would be like in an airport waiting for an airplane and just watching the people because I was a people watcher. And I just see somebody sitting in a coffee shop, some guy, with his nose in a book or something. And I'd be like, that guy right there, he actually is on his way out of town to see his girlfriend. And he's got a wife and kids at home. And he's going to go see his girlfriend. And she doesn't even know he's got a wife and kids. And what else? He doesn't know that his girlfriend's actually pregnant. And here I'm thinking I'm just being creative and making it up. But you know what? I bet I wasn't making all of it up. I bet there was a big part of that was true, because this is stuff that's just coming into mind. And the more you realize that you are claircognizant, the more people confirm what you're thinking, then that will help you to realize that too. There are a lot of other ways to practice. Some of my favorite ways would be like predicting things. So one way that I really used to annoy my ex is I could always tell when there was going to be an interception for his football team, or if the other team was going to miss or hit like an extra point or a field goal. So I don't know why. I would just be like, oh, it's time for an interception. And he'd be like, yeah, I don't even talk like that. And then sure enough, there's an interception next play. And it was so consistent. It was actually scary.
Right. And if you are going to miss next week's show, it's because Jen and I are in Vegas and we're betting on.
Yeah, I'm super claircognizant. Right? Because actually throwing dice is another way. Like you can, and I wouldn't recommend doing it with 2 dice like you would in craps or anything, but take a die and just think, okay, roll it, but close your eyes and then think, oh, it's a 2, and then open your eyes. See how accurate you are, because I bet you'd be fairly accurate. There's also something called Zener cards, and those are 5 cards that have symbols on them. And I know April last time she talked about with clairvoyance, one of the exercises was to picture whether a card in a regular deck was, red or black. But with the Zener cards, it's different symbols. And you can even make your own, like take 5 index cards and, put different drawings on them or something, and take those and try and use those kind of like with the dice, or just, put them face down, shuffle them up a little bit and try and figure out which one is which.
So every time I hear you mention Zener cards, I can't help but think that scene in the Ghostbusters where Bill Murray has those 2 college kids and they're hooked up to electric shocks. And the pretty girl, she's getting them all wrong, and he's telling her she's right. And the poor other guy is actually getting them right, but he keeps shocking him.
That's classic Bill Murray for you.
Classic.
Yeah. And then I know there's a lot of exercises here. One other way is to predict the time of day. This is actually one of the ways that I realized that I was very claircognizant was one of my special powers, which actually I guess is kind of a power, is I can almost always correctly predict the time. Like I can be sitting at my desk and working away, and I'll even think, I wonder what time it is. And I'm like, you know what? I bet it's 10:20. And I look at the clock. Sure enough, it's 10:20. And I don't mean 10:19 and 10:21. I mean 10:20. And during the day, you might think, well, okay, you kind of know how much time passes. But if I get up in the middle of the night, I can usually tell, like, oh, I bet it's about 2:45. And sure enough, it's 2:45. And I don't always get up right at the exact same time. So it's kind of interesting. If you want to, again, practice, that's a really good way. If you get up in the middle of the night, before you get a chance to look at the clock, kind of, say, hey, kind of guess what time it is and see how right you are.
That's a great one. I like that.
So that's claircognizance, and we had talked about how claircognizance, and well, I should say all the clairs kind of work with each other, along with each other. And for me, one of the ways that they really work together, and a good example for that was when you had already mentioned a couple for you too, when I was again in my early learning period, and I went to some classes that were taught by a very good psychic. It was supposed to be the week to do clairtangence, which is, clear feeling. And someone had brought in a toy and they were passing it around the room, and people were taking turns trying to guess what it was, the story behind it, who it belonged to, whatever the details were. And I couldn't wait for my turn. Because I'm like, I know that this is. I'm like, it's a little boy, and I can see him in a car seat. He's got curly blonde hair. He's got really blue eyes. I think this toy, I can see him with a dog, like a little fuzzy dog. And I was just thinking all this. It finally got to me my turn. I put this thing in my hands and I started saying all that. And the lady who brought it in was like, you're exactly right. Every single thing you just said is right. And then I thought, oh, wow, I got a hit. That's what we call it sometimes in psychic terms. I got a hit. And I was so happy. And then I was on my way home and I thought, wait a minute. I knew all that before I ever touched the thing. So that really wasn't, that it was actually my claircognizance coming through. And I'm like, well, okay. And that was the first time I ever really realized how things work together or how they can get confused.
Oh, for me, I was just yesterday, I did a session for a client. So just to give you an example, if you tuned into the last session, the last episode of this, you'll know that clairsentience is the one I purposely keep low volume because of the emotional release work that I do. So I definitely put more time and effort into developing the other 3 clairs. So clairvoyance is my top clair. So as I'm doing a session with a client, I am seeing things. And then sometimes when I'm not seeing things, my claircognizance is popping additional information in my head. And every so often, when this is a really important message for a client, my spirit team will giggle and they will clap hands. So I will see hands clapping, but I will hear giggling. And sometimes I get that on love questions when my guides and my angels are telling me it's a particularly good match. Or if the client has asked me a question and it's a particularly significant path that the client needs to be on, I'll get that clapping. I'll see the clapping and then I'll hear the giggling. So just in that one session alone, I had my top 3 clairs there.
That's awesome.
And yeah. So, and occasionally, the heart chakra might warm, or I'll get excited and butterflies in my stomach. So the clairsentience can kind of chime in there. But so just yesterday, that gives you kind of an idea on how these clairs can sort of weave together.
Yeah, actually, I was at a mediumship session once. It was one of those group ones where there was a medium there, a different psychic than I just referenced a minute ago. But he was doing like a group reading where there were probably about 15 to 20 of us sitting in chairs. And he was, sending energy out there. And, whoever came through, he would start talking. If you've ever watched any shows about mediums, when they do it in a group setting, it's exactly like that, but a small group setting. And all of a sudden, he started explaining things. He started describing things that he was seeing, but then he's like, oh my gosh, I can taste beer. He could taste beer. And then someone was like, oh my gosh, that's my uncle. Like he was known for drinking beer all the time. And that was the first time that I realized that that's actually a thing. And that's actually called clairaudience, where you can actually taste things. And, there is not just these 4 clairs. There are a lot of other clairs as well.
Sure. I call some of these the rare clairs.
That's a good one.
The rare clairs. The clairaudience, I did have one, and I see that the least, and that I did have one client who, when we did emotional release work, the emotions released for her as a taste. So she would get, each emotion had a different flavor. So that was pretty interesting. So fun April fact, super funky fact, is I've lost almost all my sense of smell. I worked it's called hyposmia, and I worked in a candle store for about 3 years. And when I quit that job, I had lost probably 90% of my sense of smell, and it's never come back. So,
and you know what? Actually, that could probably be convenient sometimes.
I know, right? Trust me, I've had retail jobs where they give me the stinky people on purpose. So, yeah. But there's this, so I want to talk to you about another clair. I'm going to skip just a little bit for its clairaudience or clairfaction, and that is clear smelling. And when I was a resident, I had this episode where I smelled gardenias in clinic. And gardenias, I love it. It's one of my favorite flowers. But I was with a bunch of Northerners, and I was like, hey, do y'all smell like gardenias? And they're like, what's a gardenia? You know, it is not a northern flower. So I kept smelling gardenias all day. And this was when my clairvoyance was really kicking up, and I was doing a lot of medium stuff, and I was seeing ghosts. And I was like, who would like gardenias? Maybe it's my dead Aunt Jackie. Like, I don't know. So after my shift ended, I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I've been smelling gardenias all day. Did Aunt Jackie, did she love those? She's like, well, I don't know about your Aunt Jackie, but I've got a bouquet of them on the table in front of me right now.
Holy cow. So that wasn't even your, your medium skills. It was, wow.
Mom. It was like daughter mom thing. So I know that you can often smell flowers. So if your guides or fairies even are near you, you may smell a floral scent. And they say Mother Mary often comes to you and smells like roses.
Yeah. Also perfume or even smoke. Like I know for me, this is something too, this is from actually way before I ever thought about any abilities I might have. Whenever I smelled pipe smoke, it always reminded me of my great-grandfather who passed away when I was 7, actually. But I still remember from my very formative years, he always smoked a pipe, and I remember that sweet smell. And I'd be sometimes in places looking around like, where is that pipe? I can smell it. But you know what? Probably nobody was smoking a pipe. It was probably me, picking up on his spirit being around. So.
Right. So the medical community likes to call that olfactory hallucination, but I prefer think of it. It's like they're aliens, and it's really one of your superpowers.
For sure. And then there's another clair also that's quite somewhat well known, called clairtangency, and that is kind of like the story that I told a few minutes ago about the toy that was being passed around, where you can, touch something and get information from it. And mediums will sometimes use that. Like if you go to see a medium and you bring a picture or a pocket watch or something like that, they might hold the item and get an energy from it and be able to do a reading from it. So again, that's also known as psychometry.
And it's interesting. It's because of psychometry and subconsciously is why a lot of empaths won't buy used goods,
right,
or go in antique stores, is because they will pick up some of that residue from a previous owner.
Yeah, for sure. If you actually, once you get to learn more and more about the clairs and how that all works, you can actually clear energies. And I think that's a really good subject for a future podcast. Maybe we can cover that when we talk about protecting yourself as an empath, which is, I think, 2 episodes away.
Absolutely. And you know what? If you guys out there, if you have suggestions for episodes or even questions, we want to know about it. I mean, please send that to us at spiritualbasicspodcast@gmail.com. And we would love to do an episode on anything that you have a burning desire to learn about. We're here for you.
Absolutely. Any questions you have, there is no such thing as a dumb question. And, we're here for you. We want to answer. We want to know what you want to know so that we can help you through this very confusing time, because we've been there. Actually, one of the things that's really popular when people first start feeling their spiritual abilities is seeing numbers. You might see number sequences or patterns, and that's actually exactly what we're going to be talking about in our next episode. So be sure to tune into that.
Ooh, and you know what? If you guys have a repeating number, maybe you guys want to send us what that is, and we'll address that during our show. We'll give you the breakdown on what these numbers mean.
Yeah, for sure. That would be fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to sharing with you again. Any questions, spiritualbasicspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great week.
All right. Good night.